how to succeed without burning out. Make sure we are recording, and we are, so this will be posted after the fact, so you can come back to it if you'd like to see the slides or anything. Couple of housekeeping items. If you want to chime in during our presentation, feel free to use the chat feature. We'll also leave plenty of time at the end of our presentation for questions and comments. We have about 30 minutes worth of content to cover, and it's a topic that we can all relate to, I think. So with no further delay, let's get started. We're going to start with some introductions. My name is Kara Cadena. I'm a liaison librarian at Grand Valley State University.
Hi everybody, my name is Samantha Minnis. I'm the Evening Operations and User Services Manager at Grand Valley State University Library.
And my name is Ashley Rosner. I am also a librarian at GVSU Libraries. And I'm going to get us started with this presentation. So first of all, we're going to get started with looking at the problem. So the problem is stress and burnout. And so a recent study looked at the fact that 1/3 of full-time workers have said that managing work life has become more difficult in the last 5 years. And this little infographic goes into a little more detail on that. It's also important to note that as stress increases, typically productivity decreases. So stress tends to zap concentration, it can cause irritability, depression, and also harm personal and professional relationships. In addition, it even will weaken the immune system. So lots of bad results are linked to stress. Next, I've got an important quote, I believe, by Audrey Lorde that explains why self-care is so important. So Audrey said, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." And so going from that, these are going to be a couple of tips as far as how to achieve that balance both between work and life. And so first of all, with work, one tip would be to set manageable goals. And so when you set these goals and you're realistic about workload and deadlines, then you have more control over what you're doing and you get less stressed. And so an example of this would be also setting a to-do list for the day or the week and so forth. Next, you want to make sure that you're efficient with your time. And one of those things would be to not procrastinate, which is difficult, yet when you do procrastinate, it definitely increases the amount of time it takes to get different activities done. Next, it's important to communicate effectively. And so an example of this would just be being honest with your colleagues or your boss when you're feeling overwhelmed and you don't think you can get things done. It's better to be honest and upfront about that and see how you can make things work. Next is don't overcommit. And so this relates to being able to say no, knowing your limits, your boundaries, what time constraints you have so that you can do the best with all of your different tasks. And finally, avoid multitasking. And so it's been studied that really multitasking is not very productive. It tends to increase the time needed for tasks and activities and also tends to increase errors and increase burnout. So it's really difficult to focus when you have a lot of different things going on. Sometimes you can't really avoid multitasking, but if possible, definitely try to focus on one task at a time. At home, it's important to do the following. So one is to unplug if you can. So kind of trying to leave work at work when you can. And even if you do need to check email and such, try not to get into it too much, just so you're able to make some time for your personal life and some time to kind of de-stress and get away from work for a while. Next, get support. And so this can be in the form of family and friends. Really, when you have a strong support system, you tend to have better immune responses, and really it just helps your overall well-being to have that support. Next, divide and conquer. And so this can be relevant both at work or at home, just making sure that responsibilities are distributed, delegating when possible. And then finally, stay active. And so, of course, this is known for its physical benefits, but it also reduces stress, depression, anxiety. It helps individuals better cope with adversity and also boosts your immune system. So lots of benefits with that.
All right, everybody, this is Samantha. So what about when we do inevitably get stressed? Right before this meeting, I'm just going to out us and say we were talking about, as we read through our tips for today, we realized how sometimes we don't even follow them. So we do inevitably get stressed out. And sometimes our coping mechanisms, unfortunately, can be unhealthy in and of themselves. And one example of that is venting. So we hear the expression, I need to let off some steam, quite a bit. It's in our popular culture. It's all around us all the time. People make a fortune selling stress balls and different things to squeeze with frustration, or punching bags and things like that. But I had started to notice in my personal life and in some of my colleagues that venting was less of a one-time stress relief, like I would have thought it was, and more of a pattern or a habit of behavior. And so I started to become curious about this. And another colleague and I did some research into trying to discover, is letting off steam healthy? And the first thing we were curious about is where that expression even comes from and where the idea of venting being healthy, which, like I said, you see everywhere all around you, how did that start to be thought of as a healthy thing? Well, the answer is that idea is based on what's called the hydraulic model of anger. And the hydraulic model of anger would have us believe that our emotions or our psychology is like a closed off set of pipes that gets filled with steam. So if something happens to us that's emotionally charged, that maybe makes us angry or frustrated, more and more steam gets piped into the pipes. And if there's no way for that to safely vent, then the pipes burst. And this actually started in ancient Greece with Aristotle, who started this whole model. And the ancient Greeks would participate or watch violent sports to help them vent some of their feelings. Then this idea became further popularized by Freud and his idea of catharsis. So we decided to look and see what modern psychology says about it and whether it does in fact help us. So I'm going to describe 3 studies to you today that we read. They all have sort of a similar pattern. So it starts with a group of participants, and the participants are agitated in some way. So all of them get annoyed basically in the same way. And then they're asked, they're split in half, and half do some sort of venting or similar behavior, and half don't. And then at the end, their anger levels or frustration levels are measured. So in the first study, the group of participants were agitated in some way. Sometimes this happens in a way that participants aren't even aware that the study has happened. So maybe the researcher is late to the appointment, or the waiting room is cold, or other annoyances sort of greet the person on their way. Then half of the participants were asked to pound nails as a way to vent their frustration. So they were asked to think about their frustration and pound nails as a way to release it. The other half simply did nothing. When they measured the participants' anger at the end, they actually discovered that the people who pounded nails were significantly more angry and frustrated than the people who sat and did nothing. In a study that's a little closer to what we might relate to in our daily working life, a group of participants were asked to write an essay about something they were really passionate about. So think about maybe a controversial issue that is deeply, deeply ingrained in someone's beliefs, and they were asked to write an essay explaining their beliefs. The essay was then returned to them with the story that it had been graded by a professor, and everybody's paper was just destroyed, just red ink all over it, everything was picked apart, they got incredibly negative feedback. Half the participants were then asked to write about how they felt about that situation and how they felt about what happened. The other half was asked to write about something completely unrelated, so whatever they wanted, but just something unrelated to this incident. At the end, the participants were asked to rate this imaginary professor who had graded their papers. The group that had written about their feelings about the experience significantly rated the professor lower. They were more angry and more aggressive with their feedback and rated the professor lower than the participants who wrote about something different, even though the experiences in the beginning were the same. The third study is even more interesting, in my opinion. So again, the group of participants gets agitated, and then they're sent home. And half the participants are asked to think about the incident that agitated them, and the other half are asked to not think about it. So this is called rumination. When you have a negative situation and you just start rolling it over and over in your head, that's called rumination. So half the group ruminated and half the group didn't. The next morning, 8 hours later, as they walked into the room for what they thought was just sort of the follow-up to the study, they were agitated again. They were re-agitated. There's actually words for this in psychology, which I think is pretty funny. So they were re-agitated in some minor way that could happen in your daily life. Say you're walking down the hall and someone knocks into you and acts rudely about it. Or as you're trying to walk into the building, a secretary is rude or won't help you find the place where you need to go. The people who had ruminated for 8 hours reacted far more aggressively to their re-agitators than the people who thought about something different. So these studies really sold to me that venting or rumination, either just, trying to vent your frustration through talking or writing or pounding nails or working out, or ruminating, thinking about something over and over again, is really counterproductive, unfortunately. But I'm not going to take away venting, one of your coping mechanisms, and not give you anything. I have a new model that I would offer. So instead of picturing your emotions as a closed-off hydraulic system, you can picture them as a pot of water on a stove. So if you have a pot of water on the stove and you turn up the heat, eventually the water starts to boil and steam starts to rise. And if you just turn off the heat and just leave the pot of water sitting there, eventually the bubbles calm and the steam goes away. What the researchers found in all of their studies is that people who did not ruminate or vent, their anger actually lasted less than 10 minutes. So compare that to the 8 hours of the people who ruminated. Our emotions are temporary, and it's really hard to remember that when we're angry or frustrated, because those are very strong emotions and they feel like we've always been angry and we're always going to be angry when you're in the midst of it. But they really do dissipate in as little as 10 minutes. So if nothing else, doing nothing will cause your anger or frustration to go away in a very short period of time. But it can be helpful to try to move those feelings along a little more quickly. Some healthy ways to do that include getting a change of scene. So if you are at a service desk and have a frustrating interaction there, if you can ask a coworker to cover for you for a second, so you can just go get a drink of water or just get a moment away, or if you can go for a walk with a colleague and talk about something completely unrelated to the situation, that can be very helpful. We're going to talk more about breathing today, but centering in on your breath. If you can't get away from the situation, just sort of breathing through it can help give you something else to focus on besides the situation. Sometimes we have to communicate with our colleagues about frustrating situations. So we know we don't want to vent to our colleagues about a frustrating situation, but I, for example, work in the operations side of a library, so it does fall on me occasionally to write incident reports or to communicate with staff and my supervisor about situations that have happened in the library that could be very emotional. When I do those things, when we have those types of conversations, it's important to ask ourselves first and foremost, what's our goal? Are we communicating this because we think it's really important that the rest of the library staff know, or that for people's safety, or to be on the lookout for somebody? Then that's a goal that we need to achieve. If we can't really think of why we want to tell this person, other than it's just a really great story, maybe that's a time to avoid sharing that information for our own health. Also, when we are having those types of conversations, it's really important to be mindful of our language. Venting often is really emotionally charged in and of itself. So you want to avoid that type of, I don't know, for me, it's a lot of hyperbole, like talking about you're so angry and, or calling names to the person who made you so angry, things like that. The most powerful way I have found to avoid venting is called cognitive reappraisal. Cognitive reappraisal is when you take the context of an emotionally charged situation and you change it. So if a colleague or a patron says something to you that's really upsetting, you're going to tell yourself a story about what happened. And if you stop and notice when you're really frustrated or angry, you'll notice that storytelling that you do internally. But what's cool is you actually get to pick the story. So instead of, I like patrons because we often know very little about them other than that one interaction we have with them. So if someone's really rude to us, maybe they come to a service desk and we can't provide what they need, we have a hard time finding resources for them, or their book hasn't arrived yet, they can react really angrily to that or rude, which can make us angry and frustrated. So we can tell ourselves that that person's just a jerk, that students are entitled, things like that. Or we could stop and say, wow, what if that person is having a really terrible day? What if they received awful news this morning, or it's one of those days, which I think we all can relate to, where everything is just going wrong, and this was the straw that broke the camel's back. What's great about cognitive reappraisal is it doesn't have to be true. You're only doing this to help move your emotions from the situation forward. So maybe that person is a jerk, and they do yell at people, unfortunately, a lot. But it doesn't matter whether or not it's true. It helps us move on from the situation. And that, I think, is the most powerful thing about all of these studies, is that we do have some level of control about how much we let negative situations impact the stress of the rest of our day.
Okay, so some tips and tricks for success. What can we do about things when we get stressed at work? We put together a few tips and tricks that we've tried ourselves or read in random places, but they're all very simple solutions. The first one is email. We all love to hate email. It doesn't stop. It always comes, and we recommend to, if you have priorities to fill that day, don't check your email first thing in the morning, because it's going to suck up a lot of time and make you pretty distracted. So dedicate a portion of your day to address email, and don't make it the first thing that you do. Do what you need to get done first. Create folders in your email for things like listservs or vendor emails that come every day, so it doesn't crowd up your inbox and you have 150 messages waiting for you, and 100 of those are not necessary or not urgent. So that's helpful. Setting goals. We've all heard that it's important to set goals, and I've heard of this rule of 3. So each day you can set yourself 3 priorities or goals for the day. No more than 3, even though you might have more than 3 things to get done. Start with your list of 3 and complete those, and then you can continue to do what other tasks that you need to complete as time permits, but at least that you've set your 3 priorities and you feel good about getting those things completed. The 95% rule is also related to email. When you're on vacation or away at a conference or you're out sick, we all know that feeling about the email is piling up, and it's going to make it your return to work that much harder, because it's just going to be so much to do and you're never going to get caught up. So the 95% rule is in regards to when you're absent from work. So check out 95% of yourself, but check email once a day. Address anything that's time sensitive or urgent. Forward whatever email you can to get it out of your inbox and into somebody who is in the office, and it will really help your stress level. You won't feel like you're completely disconnected. I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. One thing at a time. So pay attention, stay focused on your list of 3 priorities. Focus is a big part of our day, so accept that you are a human being and you can only do one thing at a time. It goes back to what Ashley was saying about multitasking, that we can't actually do more than one thing at a time, and if we can't do it very well. So try and keep that in mind too, and don't be too hard on yourself. Water is important. We've all seen the studies about how water has so many benefits for us. Dehydration causes energy generation in the brain to decrease, so our brain activity lowers without enough water. Depression is linked to dehydration because most of our brain is water. So drinking water throughout the day quenches your anxiety. If you need to take a little break, have a glass of water. Try and keep a water bottle on your desk or nearby, a traveling one in your work bag. When we are dehydrated, our cells feel it at the molecular level, and they communicate this to our subconscious, and that creates this anxiety and this feeling of threat. It threatens our survival. So water is really important. It's also how our body detoxifies, and it's impaired when we're dehydrated. So remind yourself to drink water. They say 8 glasses a day. And then the exercise is important too. We're not going to sit here and lecture you about diet and exercise, but those things are important. Even 15 to 20 minute brisk walk will help you clear your mind. And it's a good reminder when you're done exercising to drink a glass of water or have water with your lunch, so you know you're at least getting that 1 glass. And then if we have during our discussion after this, ideas on how to drink more water or incorporate water or make water more exciting with fruit or essential oil dropped in there, anything like that will be fun to chat about in a few minutes. Breathe is my next point. Breathing. When you get overwhelmed, take 3 deep breaths using the Foursquare Approach. So the Foursquare Approach, this is a graphic I found. It is breathing in, inhaling for 4 seconds, and then holding it for 4 seconds, and then exhaling for 4 seconds. And if you do this 3 times, it really helps calm you down. It actually slows your heart rate down, and as a result, lowers your stress level. So you know when you get anxiety and you're nervous about something, you can almost feel your heart beating through your chest. Just try and keep this Foursquare breathing in mind. And I'd like us all right now to at least try this 1 time. We don't have to do 3 because I'll probably pass out. But okay, so let's take an inhale. Exhale. Can't you notice that? You feel something. So if you did that 3 times, you can do it at work. No one will even have to know that you're doing it. Just keep that in mind. It'll help keep you level and steady. So this list of tips is not exhaustive, and we wanted to ask you all to share tips that you have for lowering stress and anxiety at work. There's many other techniques that we've heard of. We just wanted to put together a nice, easy to remember list. So we'll open it up for anything, any suggestions or tactics that you try to keep your head level at work. And you can just start typing. Oh, good, we have. Yoga is great. And I use YouTube a lot too for a quick breathing exercise. They have those like images of inhaling and exhaling that move that help you do the breathing exercises. I have a Waves app on my phone. Oh, good. Yeah, music can be very helpful.
There are a couple of, I don't know if anybody uses Spotify, but there are a couple of playlists that I really like for that are sort of like, they're even labeled something like concentration or something like that, and they're just really good instrumental to have on in the background. I work in a suite with a lot of other people who are doing a lot of other really noisy work, which is great, but it is hard when you need to focus, and that can help with that as well.
Also, as you guys are thinking of different ideas, we do want to point out the next page on our slides are just a few recommended resources. So some different places that you can go to learn more about burnout, especially librarian burnout, or some other tips on mindfulness at the Tiny Buddha site.
And 2 Bossy Dames I put on there, they sometimes do talk about self-care. That's something they're pretty passionate about. But more than that, it's a weekly newsletter that you get on Fridays, and it just covers a wide variety of pop culture things and fun things. And so it's, for me, the perfect, like I just keep it in my inbox, and they're perfect little nuggets for when I need to take a quick break. So I can just click on one of their links and read an article and then get right back to work. So that's why I recommended that. They're not specifically related to self-care, but it's one of my self-care exercises.
At Grand Valley, where we work, there's a health and wellness initiative. So there's a lot of university-wide efforts to help reduce stress and take care of yourself. Like we have yoga classes on campus over lunchtime that we're allowed to go to, and they give us time to eat our lunch after. Um, what else do the health and wellness folks do? They send out like weekly newsletters to our mailbox with tips.
There's a mindfulness meditation group that meets, I think, a few times a semester. And what's great about, I was going to mention too, what's great about the breathing exercises and yoga and mindfulness is that those things affect you even when you're not doing them. So I think that's something I've discovered, that even if you're doing yoga in the evenings or the mornings, or you go to mindfulness, every other week, that still like sort of lowers your threshold of stress. And then, so as stressful things inevitably happen to us, we are less reactive to those things. So it's good to have them for in the moment, and then it's also good to know they're in our arsenal for other times, even when we're not doing them.
Does anyone else have a wellness program at their school that they work at or their university? No. Susan, you're allowed 90 minutes per week off work to work out. Yes, so are we. I think it's a 90-minute thing. And we also have the option, if it works with our schedule, to work from home some days, which is nice if you have to, work on a certain project and don't want any distractions.
So one other resource I came across just right before this webinar that I wasn't able to put into the slides, but I thought we could talk about if we had some time. And so since it does seem like we got a little bit of time, I came across an article titled "When Stress Strikes, 10 Questions to Help You Take Better Care of Yourself." And so I just like to take a little bit of time to share these with you. And if you have any reactions or suggestions for other questions that you could ask yourself, definitely feel free to put those up in the chat box. So the 10 questions are as follows. First, who can I turn to for support and comfort? Second, who should I avoid? Third, what does my body need to feel nourished, healthy, and strong? Fourth, what responsibilities do I need to relinquish so I can attend to my needs and feeling my feelings? Fifth, what unhealthy or unhelpful strategies or activities do I need to avoid? And some examples of that were listed are caffeine or maybe watching TV too late at night. Sixth, what spiritual practice connects me to God or another higher power I believe in? 7, what will bring me comfort right now? So it could be something like a cup of tea, or maybe if you have more time to get a massage or something like that. 8, how can I express my feelings healthfully? And so we talked about venting not being the most helpful way, but maybe journaling or doing another activity. 9, what object can I use as a talisman to remind me to relax and be in the present moment? And so this is something I actually attended one of our university's mindfulness classes, and we're all giving a rock that says breathe on it. And so that's a type of a talisman. And so whenever you see that rock, or if you have it in your pocket, it just reminds you to take that moment to maybe go through 3 of those deep breath exercises. And lastly, what's a healthy distraction for me when I need to take a break? And so maybe it's looking at a few memes or something like that, or it's taking a walk with a colleague, just anything that's a healthy way to take a break and get out of the moment when you're in a really stressful situation and just need to take some breaths. So if you have any suggestions or any other ideas of questions, we definitely would welcome those in the chat box. Just any other ideas of things to ask yourself.
And the other thing I wanted to mention is these things don't take very long. So even if you're really stressed out and you don't feel like you have enough time in the day to get everything you need to get done, the Foursquare breathing takes, under a minute to do, or to walk around the building and come back. Doesn't take long. Every time you pass through a door, that's a good one. I like that. Number 4.
Number 4 was, what responsibilities do I need to relinquish so I can attend to my needs and feeling my feelings?
That's a good one for me to pay attention to. I don't know how many of you are on the tenure track, but I am on it right now, and I'm in year 3, and I've been saying yes to every opportunity that comes my way, and it's finally caught up to me to where I'm starting to pay more attention to what I actually have time to do.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with another colleague last night about that, and I don't struggle saying no to other people, but I struggle with saying no to myself because I have such a variety of interests and passions, but I'm just one person with just the 24 hours a day, unfortunately, and so I have to learn to relinquish the responsibilities.
Also, I can put the title of this blog in the chat. I don't have, the link would be kind of hard to get to, but I'll just put that title in and you can Google it if you are interested in taking another look at these different tips.
Yes, Susan, it's hard to remember that. It's a good reminder, though, that we are human beings and we can only do what we can do.
Another thing that can be interesting with that, and we didn't talk about it today, but there's a technique, like a efficiency technique called the Pomodoro Technique. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, and there's a book and stuff, and I practice sort of a version of it. But part of that is that you focus for 25 minutes at a time and then take 5-minute breaks. And what's been powerful to me about that, more than the focus and the breaks, is recognizing that you only have so many 25-minute sections in a day. And you might, you get to work, you add up the time you're at work and how many 25-minute sections you have, but then you add meetings in, and then you take away another couple of 25-minute sections because you know that you're going to be walking from one meeting to another, or you're going to need to check email or things like that. And before you know it, you only have maybe 4, maybe 6 25-minute segments to get stuff done. And that can be disappointing, but it can also help you really, as Kara was talking about, when you're setting your 3 things, it can really help you focus in on what's the most important thing that you have to do that day and how much time things actually do take.
What was that called?
I think it was called Pomodoro. It's, I believe, the Italian word for tomato. And it's a book, like I said, of like the idea, the main idea of it being that you set a timer for 25 minutes and then you focus only on one thing for those 25 minutes, and then you give yourself like a 5-minute break. You get up, you get a glass of water, and then you come back and either decide whether you want to focus on the same thing for another 25 minutes or move on to another thing for 25 minutes. And the other thing I found that was really powerful about that is it took me a while to be able to focus for 25 minutes. That doesn't sound that long, but when you're not used to it, it's work. It makes you tired. And so I actually had to lead up to it, and I hope this isn't just me being pitiful, but I had to like focus for 10 minutes at a time, and then 15 minutes at a time, and then 20, and then build up to that 25. And I still sometimes struggle with it. So I would recommend, what I did is I set the timer for 25 minutes like it said, and then as soon as I found myself getting distracted or wanting to like click around the internet or check my phone, I checked what time it was on my timer. And that's when I noticed that I could really only focus for like 15 minutes at a time. And so then I started setting the timer for 15 minutes and did that for a few days and then sort of built up. Because especially in a world like we are in with multitasking and so many technological intrusions into our day, it can actually take a lot of effort to make yourself focus for 25 minutes at a time.
I know a professor here who does that, but it's in 15-minute increments. It's for those 3-hour classes that they have, and he was losing students after the first hour, and so he just chunked everything in 15 minutes, and they take breaks frequently, and he's noticed large improvement. Yeah, for focus and engagement. Well, if anyone has any other suggestions or tips they want to share, we'd love to hear them. Otherwise, in a few minutes, we'll probably just let you all out early and have an extra 20 minutes to practice mindfulness. Thank you for joining us. This is something we could talk about probably all day.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. This is going to be posted on the ACRL website. And we'll send you a link when it's up there. We'll send a link to the list. So if you're on the new member discussion list, keep an eye out for it if you want to refer back.
Yeah, and if you try any of these things or have any other thoughts or tips, write to the listserv about it. We'd love to hear about it and keep the conversation going.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.